Hi, everybody. Charles Hoskinson here, live from warm, sunny Colorado, trying out my new Rode mic. Let's see if you guys like it or not. It's the Rode Procaster. I'm just trying to find the right microphone. It's like a endless river where you can never quite get there. Today is November 10th, 2020. We are nearly out of this egregious year. How about that? And I am very, very excited to see it go. Next year is going to be a great year. There's going to be a lot of crypto advancements on the horizon, and it looks like with the new Pfizer vaccine that most of the vaccines that come out will be very efficacious, which means that we're all getting back to work sooner rather than later. We can travel again, and boy, long overdue. We still see tremendous commercial demand for the things that we do. A lot of discussions. A lot of people are very interested in the Cardano platform. A lot of people are very interested in Prism as an identity service. And hopefully we'll have some good announcements of big Africa deals to close sooner rather than later. They always say 2 weeks. 2 weeks. We're on Africa time, though. So it takes a little while for that to kind of work its way through. But these are large deals involving potentially millions of people. So, they'll come when they come. Technological progress is remarkable. Every week we're releasing something. If you guys use Daedalus Flight, you'll be able to play around with Ledger and Trezor. And we should be able to move that over after 1 to 2 weeks to Daedalus Mainnet, which means before the end of the month, knock on wood, we should have full hardware support finally for Daedalus. Long, long, long overdue. Ledger and Trezor. And we're actually doing a Ledger update here in a bit. And that's going to carry some cool features and functionality with it as well, specifically for multi-staking. We have a big multi-staking agenda that's happening, and it looks like the bulk of that work will be done in early Q1 to mid Q1 of next year. We're right now really focused on multi-asset and extended UTXO and improvements to metadata and multi-sig and these types of features and functionality for the system. So we'll get that done, and then we'll move on to hybrid wallets and move on to partial delegation and these other features. That's right, the next item in the backlog. A lot of smart contract stuff going on, but I'm going to reserve talking about that till the end of the month at the product update. Although I guess my guys want to move the product update from the end of the month to Ada Lovelace's birthday, and I think that's like early December. So. Either end of November or early December, one of these days. We'll do it. But there's a lot to say, and I think you guys will be pleasantly surprised about some things. Other than that, just standard chipping away at stuff. It's the holidays, and we always try to work around it. And release cycles are still strong. We're still number one all year long, number one for commits on GitHub for cryptocurrency projects. And we just keep updating each part of our infrastructure. Weekly updates to Drestia, Node every 2 weeks. Daedalus keeps chipping away, and a lot of improvements in the periphery as well. All right. Let's get to your questions. Any update on Paper Wallet? So many of you are aware that I really, really, really would love to have paper wallets that are encrypted with a PGP key or other cryptographic asset. And so my ideal paper wallet, and I made a video about this, would have a QR code with the public key information and a QR code with the private information. And the private QR code is actually encrypted with a PGP key. So I'd love to see that. And if we can get there, then it solves one of the biggest attacks on paper wallets, which is the printer attack. You print it out. And so the problem is the printer keeps in buffer the stuff that it's printed. And so unless you have a way of purging that buffer, someone can go and, using some techniques, reprint things that were printed previously. So if your paper wallet is encrypted, if they reprint it, they just get access to an encrypted piece of paper. Furthermore, digital backups are also far more secure because when you print the PDF, you can also store the digital backup in email, and because it's encrypted with ideally an asset like a PGP key, it's quite secure, that backup. So we're working on that. A lot of work is going into it. QR Code Center is kind of the linchpin to all of it. And it shouldn't take additional sets of work above and beyond that. I'd say probably a few weeks above and beyond that, but it has to be scoped. So it's with Darko now. BAs will take a look at that as soon as they finish the hardware wallet multi-sig scoping. There's still some BA stuff to do there. And then that's the next item in the agenda. But it's a high priority for me. Now, hybrid wallets, when the hybrid wallets come, then what you can do is you should be able to stake from a paper wallet. So you create the value keys and they live on the paper wallet, and then the staking tree in the HD wallet, that lives on Daedalus. And so you'll be able to actually manage staking hot, but then you have the value sitting on paper. So that's kind of the best of both worlds. Cold paper wallets, cold staking. Do you listen to Lex Friedman, and have you discussed possibly going on his podcast? Yes, I am a Lex Friedman fan. He's a bit low energy, but all his ideas are very high energy, and his guests are too. One of these days, I'll go on his podcast. It's just we're going to reserve the high population podcasts until after certain milestones have been achieved. I often call this Rogan after Gogan, so that we basically have a good net to bring large groups of people in. We're about halfway through that effort, and a lot of rebranding, a lot of website development. Like I have to change over IOHK to IOG, and we have to take care of all of that. A lot of product marketing is being done right now. The first part of product marketing always takes the longest because you have to develop your product marketing model. And right now we're doing that for Ouroboros, and we have a really good way of explaining Ouroboros, which I think is great. Then we're going to go parallel and start explaining different parts of the system, like the network stack, the smart contract model, extended UTXO, these types of things. So hopefully we'll clear all that out in the next 60 days, but it might be optimistic. Hi, Charles. K and A naught parameter go hand in hand. Will we see a change in A naught when K equals 500 next month? Probably not. We'll still have some discussions about it. We are looking at curve benefit and other CIP-like ideas that have been proposed. And we are definitely putting some effort into seeing if we could do something later next year that's a bit more elegant. But I'm not aware of any A naught changes that are going to go with K. But I might be wrong on that. I just focused, the last meeting I had on it was strictly about how we were going to increase K from 150 to 1,000, so 500 and then 1,000 sometime in Q1 of next year is the current plan. Are you still working on Ethereum Classic? Yes. In fact, we're roughly on schedule for Mantis to be at testnet stage, fully running with all of the ETC updates since we stopped working on Mantis at the end of this month. It might slip a week or two, but things are looking pretty good there. And then we'll try to productize that and take it to market Q1 of next year, proposing a treasury system. And if enough people go along, then there'll be a hard fork for that. Otherwise, we'll completely recuse ourselves and retire and go work on a different blockchain with a different code as law mentality. And at that point, I think ETC is a dead project. But I'm optimistic that the community will go along with us and work on a code as law with a treasury viewpoint. And we'll have a lot of great independent developers who are able to take it to the next level. But it was a worthwhile investment regardless. We learned a lot along the way, and we got a lot of infrastructure we got to use in various different things. Will there be a Daedalus mobile app? Probably in the future. Charles, would you like to come on the Ada Angels podcast? Sure. Go ahead and talk to Michael Lagatuta He's my executive assistant, and he'll get you all scheduled up, and we'll push it in. Charles, you've mentioned Kanye coin. Isn't Gogan a bit late? Go fuck yourself. You guys. Gogan's not late. We've already launched parts of it. You know, we keep pushing through. Yeah, of course we're going to do some form of multi-asset on the Mint network that we're launching soon. We could very easily issue Kanye coin and these other things, but we don't have accurate vote counts yet. We have to wait for all the voting to be certified, and then we actually know the accurate counts, or else the monetary policy would have to change as new votes come in, or recounts change votes. So at the end of the month. It's like you guys keep thinking, everything's a light switch, and we switch it, and then everything's there. It's not. It's a spectrum, we keep saying, and it takes time and iteration. Ugh. How far in the future is satellite network? Well, we're not going to do a satellite network unless the community wants to do a satellite network. And that would be done through Catalyst, and there'd have to be sufficient funding there. We'd have to be at the scale of Ethereum before that would make sense. So maybe we get there next year, maybe we get there in 2022, but it'll be a really fun project to go do, and SpaceX would certainly be willing to do it. Guys, if you ask about Coinbase, I'm not going to answer. Can't answer, can't talk about it. I've told you guys the same thing. Nothing to say about it. And great exchanges list us when the time is right. That's all I can say. That's all I'm going to say. No matter how many times you ask, I'm not going to answer. Well, this is an interesting question from Kevin. Hi, Charles. I'm a disabled vet living here in Colorado. I was curious, can the blockchain be used for anonymous counseling/therapy to eliminate the stigma of getting mental help? This is why a lot of people do online therapy as opposed to in-person therapy. I don't really think a blockchain actually accommodates or has a direct connection to that. It certainly can be for payments, because you can have anonymous unlinkable payments and these types of things, but it doesn't really help much for the actual act of doing these things. And counseling is a highly personal endeavor, so even if you're not physically there, the counselor tends to get to know you very well. There's a related field of AI-assisted therapy where people who talk to intelligent assistants, they're starting in some cases to have a whole subfield of intelligent assistance form called companion assistants. The closest analogy would be like the movie Her, where you fall in love with your intelligent assistant. But there is a potential that they could create AI-assisted counseling because the stigma of therapy would be removed if you're talking to a machine. But unfortunately, blockchain doesn't have much to say there. More partnerships with Runtime verification. Oh, they're all in. They're working hard. Yella's coming back with a passion. We're also improving K as well. We're real excited about it. At the product update that we do, whenever it is, either the end of the month or December, then we're going to go ahead and have them come out and show a lot of really cool stuff. You guys are going to be excited. Any updates on the Litecoin partnership? Well, it's in the hands of the Litecoin community, and I think we have to write a LIP, Litecoin improvement proposal, to basically talk about NEPA POWs. And we will have a wrapping mechanism at some point soon for Cardano, and we'll be able to reuse that. Do you think 5G is bad for our health? No. Another conspiracy theory. Do-do-do. Charles, as a game developer, I'd be interested to know you think would be the hardest to develop, games or blockchain. I think they're equally difficult in their own ways. And so to write a blockchain, you have to have an intersection of distributed systems, incentives, and cryptography. Okay, so you have to kind of know how to get stuff to work with many people all around the world in a Byzantine system. You have to know how to do all the crypto because if you don't do that right, the system doesn't work. It's not secure. And then you have to create the right incentives for growth and adoption and use and utility. Okay, so that's one set of skills. We talk about game development. That's really the intersection of experiences, narrative, entertainment, and perhaps education. So you have all these different things that come together, and they can involve puzzles and a different set of incentives, a lot of gamification concepts to make the game addictive. So while the code may not necessarily be as complex, although graphics engines are really involved things, and the optimization techniques people use for video games are truly remarkable. The real meat and potatoes is how do you find that right balance and intersection of these things together. And there's been a lot of failed attempts. I mean, games are one of those asymmetrical things where if you get it right, you go, parabolic and holy shit, you make boatloads of money, but 99% of the time you fail. And your cost of distribution is very low these days. So if you knock it out of the park, you're Minecraft and you're like a small shop and you've made billions of dollars from that. But that's the exception to the rule rather than the rule. And why games fail is because they fail to find the right blend of narrative and experiences and entertainment and education to really pull together and get things where they need to go. And sometimes you just can't grow beyond a genre. Like adventure games really don't get so high up on the food chain and so forth. So video games are difficult in their own respect, as are blockchain, but they're different things. And I do both, and so I have to use different skill sets for them. Hey, 2PenC. What? How do we decentralize education system? The education system. We decentralize it by decentralized credentialing. Because once colleges and universities no longer are in control of who knows what where, the credentialing component, because that's what the traditional college degree process does, is it creates these check marks and basically people pursue them because they want to get better vocations. When you break that up into different domains and skills and you have different custodians, you see order of magnitude or more reduction in cost of credential, and you no longer have these monopolies there. So it's a very different education system, but credentialing is the key. And we've seen great progress with Coursera and great progress with Udacity and edX and these other platforms. And that trend will now hyper accelerate because of coronavirus. Everybody had to stay at home for a year, and the universities were arguing for a long time that online education is not equivalent to regular education. Now all of a sudden they're all doing online education, and the world didn't come to an end. So the cat is out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle there. And then blockchain basically is the part where you store those credentials so that they're auditable, time-stamped, and immutable. Charles, can you give any update on how Haskell is being taught in developing countries? We just finished the Mongolia class. This one was our first one that we did digitally. Normally, Lars will actually live in the country with a TA. Before Mongolia, we did Ethiopia. Before Ethiopia, we did Barbados. Before Barbados, we did Athens. Athens was the first time we did it. It doesn't scale too well doing the class in person, but we like doing that. And they're smaller class, 20, 30 people in this idea. Basically, we work with the Ministry of Education and the universities. They provide us the resumes of qualified students. We winnow the set down from 300 to 500 applicants to 20 to 30. The class runs for about 3 months. 2 months are hardcore Haskell and functional programming. And then 1 month is Marlowe and Plutus. And this was the first class where we did the modern Marlowe and Plutus. And then the really, really, really good ones we tend to hire. and we bring on board either in the commercial division or as junior developers. So I would like to do another class in Ethiopia soon, and if we close a deal there, we're going to start making very considerable investments in that jurisdiction. Can't the credentialing component be abused, rather like fudging on my credentials to get a job? No. If they're blockchain based and they're credible credential organizations that issue those credentials, then actually it's quite the opposite. In fact, right now it's really hard if you're a global company to verify credentials on people's resumes. It's one thing to say you're a Harvard graduate. It's another thing entirely to say you're a graduate of some university in Uganda. Because even if you can get transcripts and the degree, how do you get comparability of those two institutions? And so generally you just have to assume they're not, and then you have to use other means of testing people's skill sets. And so that's the point. If you can just go to those other means to start with, that's a much better universal credential than a particular institution in a particular geography. Notes 33-year-old should have that hairline. Love you, buddy. Talk to Prince William. Yeah. Yeah. Rah. Brain is so big it's pushing the hair out. Charles, when do you expect the peer-to-peer layer to be available for the Cardano node? There's two parts. There's the peer-to-peer governor, and then there's all the profiling that needs to be done for the peer-to-peer policy to run. Both are being developed. There's only 2 people on that team working on that, and they're kind of chipping away at it. So I anticipate that experiments will continue being run throughout this year, and we should be able to complete it and finalize all of it before D hits 0. So sometime in early Q1. I was kind of hoping to get it done this year, but it's not really critical. It doesn't change the operations of excuse me, of Cardano. Favorite Monty Python skit? Monty Python and the Flying Circus. My favorite skit is the joke so deadly that it kills people after they hear it. It was translated to German and used during World War II. It was a great skit. Highly recommend it. Charles, do you take any medication or nootropics? Your ability to retain information is staggering. I do take lion's mane every day. I also take Alpha Brain. Huzzah! It's pretty good. Good for dreams. Great nootropic. Is Charles getting the questions from the chat here? Well, absolutely, Nicholas. We're actually simulcasting on 3 different platforms: Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. I was going to say Google. I'm so used to saying Facebook, Twitter, Google. This is a very interesting philosophical question. Charles, are objective moral values and duties real? If so, how do you ground them? I think you should always aspire for discoverability. So the difference between knowledge that you gain from insight into the world and knowledge that just is invented out of a human's brain is the ability to rediscover it if it's lost. So imagine if somebody walks by and sets the Bible on fire, and it's the last copy ever, and everybody gets amnesia, never the goodbye Bible. So the question is, will Christianity be rediscovered? Will all that doctrine, the stories in Exodus and Genesis and all of these other things just magically rematerialize? The answer is probably no. It's knowledge that was written down and passed down generation to generation as narratives, but it's not discoverable. Whereas, let's say we forget everything we know about gravity. Then when you go to gravity and you start, thinking about it again, and you start noticing physical phenomena, 100 years, 200, 300 years down the road, we could start rebuilding the prior knowledge that we had. That's why you see there's cyclic nature of knowledge, where things that the Greeks and Romans knew were lost during the Dark Ages, and then they were rediscovered during the Renaissance. And actually the Greeks and Romans rediscovered things that happened during the Bronze Age that the sea people got rid of. So there's that great cyclic nature of knowledge. Okay, so there's a question of, well, is there a moral reality that is discoverable? So, if you started from no prior knowledge, could you over time rebuild the same system regardless of who you are? And I believe it is possible, because what you could do is you could look at various social structures and you could compare them, and then you'd say, okay, which social structures tend to be more stable? Which social structures tend to have more happiness if it's measurable? Let's say you can measure such things in a utilitarian sense. What social structures tend to be more sustainable, meaning that they'll last unmolested for hundreds or thousands of years? And then you say, okay, from those social structures, is there a code of conduct that they have in common? And I'd argue that there is one. Like, for example, societies that don't rape, pillage, and murder probably are more stable than societies that do. Societies that respect property rights and don't embrace theft are probably more stable than societies that don't. Now, people like to ascribe Judeo-Christian values to these types of things. Well, Japan doesn't have that, but it's also a very stable society. So I don't think it's from a deontological divine command theory viewpoint that somehow we're good because we believe in one value system. It's just there are common threads that you can see. Now, this is a very goal-oriented way of looking at morals and ethics, and it's a very macro way of looking at morals and ethics, not a micro way. So macro in that it's for the society, micro in that it's for the individual. It's entirely possible that you can have a moral code that leads to a stable, prosperous society that is just terrible for the individual. And this isn't the danger of this type of analysis that people would do. So, for example, you can have a totally stable, great society, but you have a weird moral code where every third child someone has, you gouge out their eyes for some, bizarre deity. This would be a pretty terrible thing, and we'd agree it's a terrible thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that society would fall apart. So you have to kind of work your way through that problem too. And, this is what ethicists do, and there are many different ways of looking at these things. But I always tend to try to be productive and long arc and say, what are the things we value? What are the things that we care about in society? And what is the definition of happiness and stability? And then from that, you probably can construct a collection of universal objective truths about how to run things and do things. And then in terms of grounding them, this is the problem of trade-offs. So it's obviously clear that certain times your values and reality get compromised. This is where great narrative fiction comes from, where people are forced time and again to make Faustian bargains or the lesser of two evils types of choices when they're not really happy with any of the choices that they have, and somehow they have to do that because the plot requires it. So where on the hierarchy do you sit of which value is more important than another value? We'd like to invent things like, oh, thou shalt not kill. Okay, but what about a war? We seem to give people a pass on that when soldiers en masse get together and go and kill somebody else. And the people that they're killing tend to be people who are no direct threat or harm to society as a whole. Some 18-year-old kid in Afghanistan is probably not going to come to America and cause much pain or harm. But there are geopolitical reasons why soldiers are there, drones are there, and these types of things are happening, and vice versa. So, there's hierarchies as well, and that's a really hard topic to think about. Did you see that the U.S. Post Office filed for a patent on blockchain voting? Yeah, that patent came in February 7th, 2020. It's basically just something to store metadata. Nothing special about that patent. Nothing special at all. When do you expect to have a fully working product? Products are already fully working. Producing cash flows for the Cardano Foundation. There's no cash flows for the Cardano Foundation from Cardano. You've completely missed the point. Tell me, how many cash flows from Bitcoin go to the Bitcoin Foundation? How many cash flows from Ethereum go to the Ethereum Foundation? That's not the point of these things. Protocol is an open protocol. Foundation's an accelerator for that. They're going to have to find other means to subsidize and fund themselves. And the foundation could disappear tomorrow and Cardano would be just fine. It is a force multiplier. It's an accelerator. It's not a necessary condition for Cardano to operate. And there's no notion of completeness with it. It's just iterative improvement, just like Windows. Windows is never done. Google, when is Google search engine done? When is it a fully working product? It's never done. How's the microchip project going in Wyoming Uni? Completely shut down for a while. We'll get back to it next year. COVID just basically crushed a lot of these types of things. Software is easy, research is easy, hardware is really hard during COVID time. Is Cardano and IOHK working on improving the election voting system because the current system is a joke? I understand 71 million people are really unhappy with the existing system, and there's indeed very serious concerns with the existing system. Cost, accessibility, potential for fraud, differing standards across counties and so forth. And e-voting is something I'm very concerned about. So we're going to start pushing not only for e-voting systems that are blockchain based, but we're also going to push for e-voting systems that are blockchain based that embrace concepts like preference voting, ranked order voting, as opposed to just Bob or Alice. So it's a big topic, lots to do, and we're going to start at the municipal and state level and at the primary and caucus level for these systems to kind of get them rolling. And then once we have some traction, we'll try to take it to the federal level. It'll take 5 to 10 years, I think. Only 71 million are concerned? Yeah, because the 74 million who won don't care. Here's the thing. People only get concerned about the fidelity of the voting system when their candidate loses. I've never heard of an election where someone wins and the winner goes out there and says, "Thank you so much for electing me, but I have some concerns about our election system." I just can't remember a time when that's ever happened. The Electoral College system is a great example. We never heard anything about the Electoral College system when Bill Clinton was president. No one talked about it. It wasn't a big thing because he won. 1992, 96, yeah, he won. Got all the votes, right? Everybody was fine with it. When Bush won, suddenly it is the biggest topic in the world. We have to replace the Electoral College. It's an anachronism. It's totally unfair and rah, rah, rah. People don't like the voting systems that tend to get rid of the candidates that they favor. And people like the voting systems that tend to keep the candidates that they favor in power. That's never been the point. The point is you think about everybody and you think about overall outcomes, regardless of the particular candidates, the particular political parties, and you ask yourself, what would you like your voting system to produce for you? The first thing that's completely lost in the American left is that we do not live in a single country. We live in a unified country of many states, and there are checks and balances here. The United States is a union of states, and states have semi-autonomy. So you don't go and build a voting system that says only 4 or 5 states have total dominion over all of the other states, and no state has any say or choice outside of these 4 or 5 population centers. Now, why do they push for that system? Because a particular political party knows if they get it, they will always win the elections. It's much easier to win the national vote with the way that they've structured things. Okay, so if you want it to represent the balance of power between states and the federal government, you do need some system that includes the states. Now, the electoral system is probably no longer relevant for that. There's much, much better ways of doing it because of advancements of communication and technology. Great, but we do need some representation of the state's will. Second, we do not currently have candidate diversity and ballot diversity. If you're a third party, you will never win a U.S. election at the federal level. It hasn't happened in so long. The last chance was Ross Perot in 1992, and all he did was just spoil it for H.W. Bush. Pretty much it. You just will not win if you're a third party because of the way the voting system works and the ballot system works, getting access to the ballot and getting people to vote for you. So you have to change from an atomic choice of Alice versus Bob, and you only get to pick one, of all the different people on the ballot to a ranked system. So even if you vote for your favorite candidate, number 2 on the ranking will probably be a third party, not the opposition candidate. What does it mean? It means you end up getting more representation of third-party candidates, especially in Senate races, congressional races, and so forth. Okay? And there's a litany of other things you need to do, but these are the conversations we should be having, because then we can get all those requirements on paper, and then you work your way backwards to fidelity and security. You would like properties like end-to-end verifiability. In 2020, I should be able to know if my vote was counted. In 2020, I should be able to know if my vote was counted correctly. In 2020, I should be able to have a paper backup to prove that in case litigation occurs and these types of things. We should be able at any time to be able to verify that the amount of people who voted is less than or equal to the amount of people who registered. We should be at any time be able to verify that the registration database has high integrity, meaning that it has been checked for unlawful registrations and dead registrants, because people die after they register, for example. Happens all the time. Okay, so the auditability of registration is a super important point. And there needs to be checks and balances in that entire process to verify the auditability is occurring. All the voting software should be open source. All of it. There is no reality where we should have closed source voting software. That is a moral crime. Because how do you know? How do you know the company doesn't just push a button and flip votes? If you're going to go from paper-based to digital voting, you must have open sourced systems. And there must be aggressive security audits. There must be intelligence agencies looking at it. You must look at these things very, 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 very seriously. Furthermore, you need resilience. You can't just use one design. Okay? Because what if there is a hidden zero-day exploit or flaw? You don't want it to overtake the entire electoral system, and then you need to apply things like forensic accounting principles to the system to secure it, like Benford's Law, and these types of things, which are smells for fraud. There are thousands of them in the forensic accounting world that you could bring to bear that would be an indication that the numbers you're looking at have some structural problem in them, some sort of issue there. Okay? And the final point is people have to understand it and actually accept it. The story here for the 2020 election isn't that fraud occurred. Fraud, of course, occurred. It occurs every single election. There's no excuse, no reality where fraud didn't occur. Okay? The problem here is a belief in the credibility and outcomes of the system. Voting systems are for us to feel good about the fact that someone has power. You say, why is this person the president? Because we chose that person to be the president. If you don't believe the selection function is fair, well then guess what? You're shit out of luck. It's just that simple. So whether the system is actually secure and actually converges to good decisions and actually does the job for us or not, no, it doesn't matter. If people don't believe in the system has to be changed, just for that reason alone. Because at the end of the day, the system is about getting us comfortable with the idea that someone has power that normal people don't have. Power over life and death, power over the purse, power to tax, power to imprison, etc., etc. Okay? So yeah, you're right. More than 71 million are concerned, especially worldwide. But people are probably concerned for the wrong reason. Their candidate lost, and therefore the system is broken. They should be asking a broader question of how do we build a better system for everybody? Hey, Charles, what's your take on Trump tweeting today he will win? So this is another example of game theory. You see, he has no downside to doing that. If he does nothing, he automatically loses. Okay? If he says he won and fraud took it away from him, he will convince a meaningful subset of the 71 million people who voted for him that that's true, in which case he is the legitimate but exiled president. Okay? Just like Al Gore did. I'm the real president. Bush didn't win the election. Okay? So he's on the outside. What are these 20, 30, 40 million people going to do? Well, Trump can go create Trump News Network. He can go buy Newsmax. He can go and take over Rush Limbaugh's show after Limbaugh dies of lung cancer, because he's probably going to go in 3 to 6 months. He takes those 20, 30 million people with him. How much money and power do you think he can preserve as a consequence of having a constituency like that? And also, he has the ultimate nuclear option. He can run for president again in 2024 with a built-in coalition of 20 to 30 very angry people who think he's cheated against a much weaker Joe Biden, who will be 83 years old, completely spent, and likely just destroyed by 4 years of hyper-partisan politics and a red wave in 2022. So he has no downside to tweeting the things he does, regardless of whether he believes them or not, because he's basically preserving a political coalition. And this is what really smart media people do. They always assess the situation and say, how do we make the best out of the situation as it is? Hey, Charles, did you make most of your money investing in BTC or starting in Cardano? Remember, I've been BTC, Ethereum, and Cardano. It was BTC, actually, was the majority, but ADA certainly is worth a lot, although I haven't liquidated much. The time to have done it was 2017. The EOS guys did. It really sucks that you have competitors that basically break the law, and then they just pay a speeding ticket and they get to keep $4 billion. It makes you wonder why we even have securities regulations. I felt most sorry for Blockstack. They did everything right, and they only raised like 24 million and spent millions to raise it, and they have no liquidity because they're a security. What incentives are you creating in the system? Donald, you need to ask a question. What's your question? In what way could Atala Prism support the voting process? Well, you have this notion of registration, okay? Votes aren't just votes. There's the mechanism of counting them, but you have to pair who has the right to vote with actual people. So your set of all people in your economy is a superset of the set of people eligible to vote. It's a subset of that set. You need to actually have an identity system to be able to know that the set of all people in your economy are real, legitimate, and alive. And that's what Prism can do for you. It can be a national ID system. What will your first drink be in your wet year? You know, I don't think I'm going to go back. I think I'm just going to stay dry. This is great. Ethereum 2 is set to go live next month. Do you feel Cardano is well placed to complete and possibly scale to the Ethereum scale in the next year or so? Ethereum 2 is not set to go live next month. The first stage of a multi-year program to roll out Ethereum 2 is set to go live. This is another thing. You know, Gogan, when Gogan, when Gogan. When Eth2. It's the same concept, guys. It takes a while to roll out. But here's the difference. Their horizon is this long, and it's layered with all kinds of issues. My horizon is this long. Okay? And we know exactly how to get there, and we have a beautiful system to upgrade to it. And everything they do, we can do soon. So I'm not worried at all. I'm really not. We thought clearly about upgradability. It was an afterthought for them, and they've been bolting it on. That carpet looks nice. I can't stop thinking about it. You know, this rug really does tie the whole room together. Do you ever do any work, Charles? I am literally in my office between meetings. Literally in my office. I had a zero knowledge crypto meeting an hour before, and I have meetings in an hour and a half. This is my lunch break. I decided to do AMA with you guys. What specifics mathematics education did you study? What field? What nice? Some of these questions are bizarre. I studied analytic number theory. My subspecialty was additive number theory, and I was very interested in integer factorization and basically how to predict how an integer would factor and more efficiently factor. And so number sieves and these things. I studied at CU Boulder, and I did not complete a PhD. Left before. So whether that makes me a mathematician or not, I spent enough time thinking about math and studying math. I'm just going to call myself that. It's not a regulated field. And we've written 90 papers, and they're chock full of math. So I think I am doing something for the academic field. Although I will go back, and I will complete a PhD one of these days, likely in computer science in the intersection of AI and computational logic. I'm really interested in seeing automated theorem provers enabled by AI. And I'd love to rebuild all the foundations of math on something called homotopy type theory. So when I have time, I'll do that. But time is not in abundance these days. Do you know how to integrate? Yeah, even integration by parts. Go figure. Oh, holy shit. Oh, man. Hi, Charles. How do you feel that Cardano and IOHK stand up technologically to groups like Polkadot, Hedera, Hashgraph, and Algorand? Hashgraph is patented, so I don't even think about it. If you're doing a blockchain and you own the patents, you're just a database. So throw them away. Algorand, I have a lot of respect for Silvio and his team. They haven't been able to get commercial adoption and traction, but they are trying. And there's a lot of good tech there in that stack that is clearly novel and unique and interesting. And of course, we compete academically, but we're quite friendly with them where and when it makes sense. Polkadot has a lot of derivative work, some of which from ours, and some of which Gavin learned from his time at Ethereum. It's a good ecosystem, good product, but ultimately nothing special. So I think we do pretty well amongst all of them. But that's one man's opinion. Anime Charles, which one? Come on, Full Metal Alchemist was the shit. It's the way to go. Can you make Cardano private like Monero? It's definitely possible to increase the level of privacy with Cardano. We're already going to explore a few things that can improve the level of privacy in the system. But if we were going to go that route, then what we would likely do is push a snark. Yeah, there are a lot of systems I like Dark is interesting from Stanford, and then you got Fractal from Berkeley, and we wrote something called Sonic, and we fully implemented it. There's a lot of work to do there, a lot of things to do there. But there are regulatory concerns, liquidity concerns, performance concerns, and so forth. And also, a private proof of stake system is very complicated. We actually figured out how to do it with Ouroboros. It's called Ouroboros Scripsinus, but it would add an additional year to 2 years of development to the project if we were to go down the privacy road. Charles, do you practice breathing techniques? Not as much as I should, but they're very valuable. There's a good book called The Oxygen Advantage, which talks about that. And there's another book called Breathe that talks about that, and I'd highly recommend reading them. When ETC Mantis? End of November, early December for the first update. Did my water fast for 3 weeks, but I was starting to feeling horrific by the end of the third week. Ever try 3 weeks? No. A week is good, maybe 2, but I've never tried anything longer than that. When code release from your quant? Yeah, it's Colin Edwards. We'll have him go on Umed's show one of these days and then talk about it. And we'll probably open source a lot of the models towards the end of the year or sometime next year. I'm not in a huge rush for it, but we'll have that conversation at some point. How do we prevent governments from becoming dictators and techno tyrants with national ID systems and blockchains in general? You can't. Not with blockchains and ID systems. You do it through the political process, checks and balances, and avoiding socialism. The more you socialize, the more you embrace communism, the more power the government gets over your day to day life. And as a consequence, they always become tyrannical. They'll eventually tell you how to raise your kids. They'll eventually tell you what's legitimate, what's not legitimate. And if you go against the dialogue, you get gulagged. It's inevitable. But that, again, is just one man's opinion. Why is it so difficult for other mobile and hardware wallets to add ADA? Well, Ledger and Trezor represent the vast majority of the marketplace, and they support ADA. And as for mobile wallets, we have Yoroi Mobile. For a long time, it was very difficult on the mobile side, but things have materialized in a way where it's quite easy to do this now. So they should take a separate look. Hi, Charles. What advice would you give someone who's just come into a windfall of money? Pay your taxes. That's number one. Number two, set aside half of it, put it into what's called an irrevocable trust with Brown Brothers, Harriman, or Bessemer, and that's your safe money. And basically, for the rest of your life, you're entitled to the interest, but divorce, bankruptcy, lawsuits, these things have a hard time touching the underlying principle. And basically, just say, okay, I have that. Put yourself on an allowance, and then diversify the other side of the money. Will it hurt Cardano if I expose Goritzel and Hansen as frauds? Well, I'm free to say anything you want. I mean, Ben's a great guy, and he does have a PhD in math. I think OpenCog is an interesting framework. I'm not familiar with Hansen. I think he's floating around that orbit. But have your fun. Favorite book on philosophy? Man's Search for Meaning from Viktor Frankl. How's the lion's mane coming along from Big Pay? I just got some fresh fruiting bodies. Been 6 months since I've had some fresh fruits. Really excited. We haven't gotten started yet. We've been actually looking at a lot of the FDA stuff because I want to do supplements. But my mycologist is living with me, studying every single day, and it's really snowy outside and hard to do construction. So right now in the reading stage, and when the weather gets a little bit better, we'll start setting up dedicated greenhouses and a lab and so forth. My goal is to grow a few 100 pounds a month, if it's possible, or at least per harvest. Will there be an in-memory database implementation? We do a lot of stuff in memory with Cardano already. So maybe you're referring to like a specialized memory database like times 10 or any of these things that Oracle produces or other vendors produce for high frequency trading. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But what does make sense is actually long term, when you talk about scalability, is to look at a distributed RAM disk. There's a Stanford project, RAM Drive, I think is what it's called, or something like that, that is exploring distributed RAM. But I'm that's a different thing, and that's for managing the state of Cardano. So if your UTXO space gets too large and you need to shard it up, that would be potentially one way of dealing with that. But that's a long-term optimization. It's not something we have to face today. Hello from New Zealand. Well, hello, Kiwi Dicky. Sounds weird, doesn't it? Have you read Stephen Covey's book? Which one? Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. The OG Stephen Covey book. Do you really see as Cardano was number one? I'd like to hope so. It's better than everything else on the market once we complete the first iteration of the roadmap, and then if we're allowed to come back for another 5 years, I don't even consider cryptocurrencies anymore. I'm looking at the world financial system as the target. Screw the cryptos. We're gonna go for number one in the world. Anti-Fragile Book Thoughts. Yeah, standard book from Nassim Taleb. There's this whole thing about taking a cue from ecology and ecosystems and resilience and applying it to financial systems or social systems in general. Whole field of study. Good ideas. Hello from Abu Dhabi. Well, hello, Abu Dhabi. Civil war in Ethiopia potentially impact on Cardano. I'm not aware of a civil war in Ethiopia. I'll talk to John about it, but last I checked, things are looking pretty good there. But you never know. Favorite Scotch whiskey? God, I haven't had it in a long time. Glenmorangie Signet is pretty good. That's a good drinking whiskey. There's some whiskeys you buy to put on your shelf and brag about, like Macallan 30, but then you need a good drinking whiskey. And Signet's nice. And we have 15 seconds. The lunch break is over. That's back to work. I guess we'll just cut it here, kids. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Fun AMA. Sometimes I do them at night. Sometimes I do them here in the office. You guys got an office AMA. Until next time, have a wonderful day.